We continue on with our 32 teams in 24 shows with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Friday, a double dip of 32 teams in 20-something shows. This time, we head down south to the state of Florida for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
So I said this about the Jets. I really mean this about the Jags. I'm taking nothing from last season and transferring it over to this season for this team. You want to talk about, DOA, dead on arrival, this team. Listen, the worst situation ever for a quarterback to be in, for everything. A rookie quarterback to be in. It was just absolutely horrible. You know the whole Urban Meyer thing. You know about Urban Meyer liking the co-eds and all the different stuff and staying in town so he can party at college bars and things.
Things went very well for Herb last year.
Yeah, unreal. So the Jags go 3-14. Of course, that's last in the AFC South. Urban Meyer gets fired in the middle of the season. We'll go through all the statistics with this team, but it was absolutely horrible. So what do? They go out and get Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning coach.
Great hair.
To come in and take over this squad. Press Taylor as offensive coordinator. He was on Peterson's staff in Philly, so they have a big familiarity with each other. They go get Jim Bob Cooter as their passing game coordinator. If you guys remember...
You just wanted to say that.
Well, listen.
It was good in Detroit.
That's what I was saying. If you remember that 3-year stretch in Detroit where Matthew Stafford, despite having very little talent out there, was still able to put up some really productive seasons in Detroit. So bring in Jim Bob Cooter as the passing game coordinator. Mike Caldwell comes in as the defensive coordinator. He most recently linebacker coach in Tampa last 3 seasons. So Peterson, Taylor, and Caldwell, your coaches and coordinators there. Now, they were very active in free agency as well, this Jaguars team. They go out, they get an offensive lineman and Brandon Sheriff to come in. He's a veteran. He is a good offensive lineman, can help out a young quarterback. Now, a head scratcher on the Christian Kirk signing, paid this dude. Listen, I think Christian Kirk's fine. I just don't agree with how much they paid him. Doesn't really matter. Not my money. Christian Kirk comes in. He gets signed. Your guy leaves the Jets, and Folo comes over and is going to play defensive line now for the Jags. You've also got Darius Williams coming over to play corner for them. You've got Evan Ingram that got signed. They signed Zay Jones. They signed Arden Key as an edge rusher. So, there are a lot of big signings here for this Jaguars team. And what did they lose? Really not all that much. Miles Jack underperformed basically his entire career. He's gone. Andrew Norwell leaves. A.J. Cann leaves. Taven Bryan, a linebacker, leaves. DJ Chark is out of town as well. But, all in all, if you kind of look at what they brought in and specifically getting a nice anchor piece and Sheriff on that offensive line for them to kind of anchor, again, for this young quarterback and finally kind of reset here in Jaguar, I think they had a pretty decent offseason.
I do not think they did enough to put the pieces necessary around Lawrence yet. I think they spent their money weirdly on the wide receivers.
Oh, that's for sure.
I know master the obvious there.
Weirdly is the nicest one.
But you're in a scenario here where your top 3 receivers are, depending on what you think of Chenault versus Marvin Jones, one of those 2 guys, Zay Jones and Christian Kirk. You had the guy who everyone said this is the generational John Elway can't miss prospect. With the number 1 pick, falls in your lap because the Jets decide to win 2 games at the end of the 2020 season. And this is the best you do? Is a combination of number 3 wide receivers? So I really don't like what they did. And it is a big improvement going from Herb to Peterson. There's no arguing that, even though there are some who think that, that might have been Frank Reich in Philadelphia, not Peterson. No, that was Peterson who did the good stuff more than Frank Reich in Philadelphia. I think Peterson doesn't get enough credit for how good Philadelphia was able to sustain until they decided to throw Sudfeld on him in Week 17 in 2020. This all comes down to Trevor Lawrence. Do we think Trevor Lawrence is good enough to transform an offensive talent around him that is pretty pedestrian into a team that can hop up and be around 500 and maybe even compete in a mediocre AFC South. I'm not fully convinced of that, Matt.
The draft, of course, we know Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall to them. They also took linebacker Devin Lloyd in the first round. They come back with a third-round pick, a center in Luke Fortner. They get another linebacker in Chad Muma in the third round. They take Snoop Connor, a running back, in the 5th round. I mean, they basically drafted Travis Etienne as well because he didn't play a single snap for them as well. So, I mean, he's coming in as a fresh guy for this team. So, I mean, he's essentially either a free agent pickup or a draft pick, however you want to look at it, because we hadn't even seen a down with him so far this year. There were just so many things that went wrong with this team that when I say, like, I don't take anything from last year to this year, I really, really don't. I mean, like, all the stories you read, that locker room left. I mean, they didn't have any respect for Urban Meyer, apparently, starting literally in preseason, like in training camp, like he was a clown show. And so
he was kicking kickers and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
It's just a disaster.
And like you read these stories of these guys who are basically, behind his back talking about what a clown this dude is and stuff. Like, it's very hard to win games when nobody has any respect at all for your head coach. And then again, you draft an ATN to kind of be a security blanket for a guy. They know each other well. He never plays a single down for them. DJ Chark was supposed to be their number 1 wide receiver last year. He gets hurt early, never plays it down so he was just Trevor Lawrence to me was behind the 8 ball from Jump Street here. And so I'm willing to give him a complete free pass. And let's see what happens from here moving forward. Now, the talent isn't necessarily all that great, but at least you have the building blocks with the coaching staff and the people that can teach him how to play this.
Right. I'll give you that. Again, I think Doug Peterson is a top half NFL head coach. But again, and I'll hold this off here. Other than Week 18 last year, in that game against Indy where Lawrence was legitimately great in that big upset of the Colts, can you even pinpoint one other really good performance from him last year? It's alarming, even with the terrible coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're going to agree to disagree on that. We're going to continue here on the Jags on the other side. Argued vehemently on the break.
Oh, it was very intense.
It was an intense argument about this Jaguars team and what you can take from last year or what you can take from collegiate years and all the different things like that. But let's at least unpack what happened last year just to let you know how big of a disaster it was. Football Outsiders, 32nd overall team, DVOA, probably not much of a surprise. 27th offense, 31st defense, 31st special teams, and that equals one of the worst teams in recent memory. I mean, seriously, it was really, really, really bad there. We did bring this up, though, and again, on top of all of the Urban Meyer stuff, on top of all the injury things stuff, I mean, you're looking at a rookie quarterback who, for the latter half of the season, Laviska Shenault was his de facto number 1 wideout for that squad, right? I mean, how are you going to a gadget guy that they were really trying to kind of use as more of like use him as a jet sweep guy and like line him up in the backfield and all that. And after all the injuries, all the things like that, he has to go out and be your number 1 wide receiver. What are we really pulling from that?
Yeah, I mean, and who knows, Matt? I agree with you. And who knows? Maybe that more gimmicky position is what he's better suited for, and now actually has a little bit more depth on the depth chart at receiver, where he could actually go back to that role. It's just we were talking about where these wide receivers rank. I think you're right with Marvin Jones; he's better than the rest. But it's after that, it's where do these guys fall in the pecking order? I think, and that's I don't know. Do they all play different roles? Do they all play kind of more similar roles, more down the field threats? I think all that we got to find out.
Well, they're going to have to run Christian Kirk out of the slot because he can't play on the outside. So it's going to be Jones and Jones on the outside. It's going to be Christian Kirk in the slot. And we're going to have to see if Christian Kirk is worth, I mean, we know he's not worth the money he got, but if he's worth, even 70% of the money that he got as an NFL receiver, because look, they've got the 12th easiest schedule in the league, right? I mean, a lot of that has to do with the fact of the division that they play in. But they've got the 12th easiest schedule. So you have an upper half easy schedule. And can you capitalize on that against games against the Texans, what I consider to be a down Titans team, right? This is all that. With all that said, Warren Sharp has them projected at 6.35 wins, which would have them kind of right on their season total. Here, yet again, sitting at 6.5. They're 7-1 to win the division. They are plus 450 if you want to say yes, they will make the playoffs. I don't think that that's a bet that you need to be making quite yet with everything. But, if you really start to kind of break this down here, Jeff, the offensive line, even with Sheriff in there, right? The problem is Cam Robinson has never really lived up to the hype coming in. So Cam Robinson's still there. Ben Barch is a guy that never has really come around. Then you got Juwan Taylor, another guy that unless he really takes some step forward, you have to start a rookie center in Luke Fortner. So herein lies the problem, I think, more outside of the pass catchers is this going to be just another thing like last year where he has no time to throw? He's getting beat up left and right. He's getting hit every single time he drops back. And, not that this is going to be a David Carr situation or anything like that, but like 2 years of just getting battered and bruised and having no time to throw and all that. Like, where's his mental state going to be, here middle of the season towards the latter end of the season as well? Because again, unless this offensive line just greatly overperforms, I think this could be a bottom 5 unit in all of the NFL.
It's a very interesting question that you bring up there, comparing him to David Carr, who of course had his whole career blown up because the expansion Texans offensive line, of course, when you draft Tony Boselli as the cornerstone of your franchise and he barely gets through a year, of course that was going to blow up like it did. Matt, I looking at their schedule here, I think we're going to learn pretty quickly what this could be. Because week 1, for people that are going to play in survivor pools and have multiple entries and decide, you know what, I want to survive to week 2 and I don't want to bother with some bad teams after week 1. You could see a lot of split entries on the Commanders and the Jaguars in week 1. It's a game they could win. We know the history of them owning Indianapolis and Jacksonville, which is one of the weirder trends in all professional sports at this point, Matt. But then you get an opportunity after the 2 road games to likely lose at the Chargers and the Eagles. You get a 5-game stretch where 4 of those games are technically home games. The Bronco game is the game in London.
Yeah.
Where, all right, if you're going to improve, you beat the Texans at home handily.
Yeah.
You beat the Giants at home in that part of the season. You give Denver a real game in London. And you know what?
Oh, come on.
Maybe even you beat the Raiders at home. Okay? So if you're going to improve. Now, do I think they survived that stretch even competently? Probably not. Because I really do think that, you mentioned it, that offensive line is really going to struggle, even with the addition of Sheriff, who is a legitimately good guard. But in the end, I think Jacksonville's probably staring at 4 to 7 wins and 7 as if everything goes right for Jacksonville.
That's how I was just staring at that schedule hard for a couple of minutes, man. That is...
They're 4-point dogs, by the way, week 1 to the Commanders.
They're what?
As we sit right now.
I probably will take the points.
They're 4-point dogs to the Commanders in week 1.
That sounds about right to me. Jeff, maybe it should be more closer to 3. I could understand that, but I think it's hard to find where you're getting. I'm coming up with 5 to 6 games. I think they could probably win it. And Jeff, I think you're right. That to me, that window is probably 4 to 7.
That's the window.
Like, I think I'm. It might be a bet on the under for me. You know what, though? It would be definitely a medium lean to the under.
A medium lean to the under. There it is. Honestly, it could be it really could be if you're bearish on the team and you think this offensive line is going to really struggle and you don't like these pass catchers, they did bring in Evan Ingram as well, who's never lived up to the hype either.
Yeah.
So maybe a change of scenery. Sometimes we see this work for guys or whatever. Maybe he can end up being we know the physical tools are there.
Right,
He's just never been able to put it together on the football field. Maybe it's an alt-under, right?
I think it might just be a smaller alt-under play for me. Like, I'm going to play.
I don't mind that.
Because, like, you're talking about, Jeff, I think it could be as bad as 4 wins, something like that. So it might as well go on the alt-under.
Yeah, and look, the one thing is they do have a bunch of games on here that are going to be coin flippy. I know it's a 4-point line against Washington, but That feels like a coin flip to me.
Yeah.
The two Texans games, they're probably going to be favored in both of those games, but go coin flip. The Jet game on the road, coin flip potentially, even though I think the Jets by week 16 might actually be a pretty reasonable football team. Detroit on the road, potential coin flip. Tennessee at home, coin flip. There are a lot of potential coin flips, but again, when the coin flip goes against you, 4-13, 3-14 again could very easily happen. And if they go 3-14 or 4-13 here, Matt, there are going to be a lot of questions asked. And even if it's not necessarily Trevor Lawrence's fault that the team is bad again, there are going to be a lot of questions asked about him. And it's going to be very interesting because we had a guy who never faced adversity in his football career ever until last year. I wonder if there's any mental psyche things if you have 2 years in a row when you have just soared through your life as a football player and you put 7 wins in 2 seasons potentially together if it goes really bad for Jacksonville. I wonder then.
The other thing here that is really working against Lawrence and just the team in general is it looks like this defense is going to be bad again. Like this defensive line, it's, Josh Allen, it's like this whole team's made up of guys that never really lived up to their potential, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, well, when you've been as bad as Jacksonville has been for as long as you have all these high draft picks, and it's like, well, are these guys going to ever pan out? And that's the thing. It's like Josh Allen, Clavin Chason, Trayvon Walker, right, is more of a project type guy. Everyone was just enamored by his physical traits.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone thinks that like he's going to step in day one and be a dominant defensive lineman.
Right,
Like,
he's the Chet Holmgren, not the Paulo Banchero.
Yeah, like Trayvon Walker's the guy that's like, oh, if we can work with this guy for 2 years, like he might then be like this, unbelievable. Once he uses all those physical tools, he's going to be unbelievable. So like you have that. This secondary, it's like, Tyson Campbell, Shaq Griffin, Darius Williams is a good signing for them. There's no doubt about that. But you look at the safety position with Cisco and Jenkins and stuff, like there's just a lot that could go wrong with this defense. And you know this as well as anyone, guys, because we watch this, constantly, is if you're constantly playing from behind and you have to throw every down and you've got a bad offensive line and the pass rushers can just pin their ears back and pass rush the hell out of you every single time, you have very little opportunity for success, right? Because if you're always down 2 touchdowns and you have to throw 85% of the downs, then it's going to be impossible for him to have a good season here. So I think we've talked ourselves into maybe like you said, I think we've talked ourselves into maybe a small alt-under here on this team.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go, it wouldn't be a crazy bet for me, but it's just going to be, that would be a smaller NFL future bet for me. But if I think there's the variance there, I would go alt-under.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.